A deafening explosion shattered the Texas night, flames erupting from my family's barn as I bolted from the house, heart pounding. The Greenhaven HOA had struck again, not just tearing down our historic bridge, but torching my legacy with calculated malice. Who were these suits, thinking they could burn away a century of pride to steal my land? This wasn't just a fight, it was war. Want to see justice unfold? Like, share, and subscribe to follow my battle against their ruthless greed. The sun was dipping low over the Texas horizon, painting the rolling plains in hues of amber and crimson as I guided my weathered pickup truck down the familiar dirt road toward home. I'd just left a grueling 10-hour court session in Austin, my mind still tangled with legal arguments and the weight of my black robe. My name is Daniel Hayes, a federal judge, but out here in the outskirts of Greenhaven, I'm just a man with a ranch, a legacy, and a stubborn streak wider than the creek that cuts through my land. The air smelled of dust and cedar, and the hum of cicadas filled the evening calm. But as I rounded the bend, my heart lurched. From a distance, I saw it, or rather, I didn't see it. The old wooden bridge, the one my grandfather built with calloused hands, the one my father patched through floods and storms, the one I'd restored to its federally protected status, was gone. I slammed on the brakes, tires skidding, spitting gravel into the air. My breath caught as I stepped out, boots crunching against the earth, and stared at the wreckage. Splintered planks littered the riverbank, some half sunk in the shallow, rushing water of Willow Creek, others drifting downstream like broken promises. This wasn't just a bridge, it was a tether to 3 generations of Hayesmen, a symbol of resilience etched into every nail and beam. It was listed on the National Register of Historic Places, safeguarded by federal law, a fact I'd ensured myself after years of paperwork and inspections. And now, it was rubble. A bright orange sign flapped in the evening breeze, mocking me with its bold print. Unauthorized structure removed for community safety, Greenhaven Homeowners Association, GHA Compliance Division. My blood boiled. The GHA, a group of polished suits who'd been eyeing rural plots like mine for their cookie-cutter subdivisions, had crossed a line they didn't even know existed. Who the hell do they think they are? I muttered, fists clenched as I yanked my phone from my pocket. I snapped photos from every angle, the shattered wood, the churned up dirt, the smug sign, each click fueling a fire in my chest. They didn't just destroy a bridge, they declared war on my family's legacy, and they had no idea who they were dealing with. I wasn't just a rancher with dirt under my nails. I was a federal judge with a network of contacts and a playbook they'd never read. But I held my cards close, my mind already mapping out a plan to make them regret this. I wasn't going to storm into their office yet. No, I'd let them think they'd won this round, while I built a case that would bury them. As I stood there, the creek's soft gurgle a stark contrast to the chaos in my head, a familiar voice broke through. "Daniel, you look like you're about to punch a hole through the sky. What's going on?" It was Caleb, my ranch hand and closest friend, pulling up in his beat-up Jeep, his weathered hat tilted back. His eyes followed mine to the wreckage, and his jaw dropped. "They tore it down," I said, my voice low, sharp as a blade. "The GHA, they called it unsafe." Caleb stepped closer, kicking a broken plank with his boot. Unsafe. That bridge stood stronger than their glass-walled office. "You telling me those city boys just waltzed onto your land and did this?" "Looks that way," I replied, holding up the phone to show him the photos. "And they left their calling card." He read the sign, his face darkening. Greenhaven HOA. Same folks who swore they had no interest in your land last month when they sent that zoning proposal. You think this is about that? "I know it is," I said, my eyes narrowing. "They want this ranch, Caleb. They've been sniffing around for months, those surveyors in polos, the clipboards, the routine inspections. I thought they were just developers scoping out the area. I was wrong. Caleb let out a low whistle, shaking his head. They don't know who they're messing with, do they? Not yet, I said, a grim smile tugging at my lips. But they will. The truth was, I'd sensed trouble brewing for weeks. Strangers had been spotted along the property line, their khaki pants and clean shoes out of place among the sagebrush and mesquite. I'd brushed it off as harmless, maybe a new housing project nearby, but now it was clear. The GHA wasn't just meddling, they were orchestrating a takeover, and this bridge was their opening shot. They thought they could bully a lone rancher, push me off my land to expand their manicured empire. They didn't know I spent my days dismantling liars in a courtroom, that I had the law and a lifetime of grit on my side. I crouched by the creek, picking up a splintered piece of oak, its grain worn smooth by decades of boots and wagon wheels. My grandfather's hands had shaped this wood. I could still hear his stories told over campfires, about how he'd built the bridge in '47 after the war, a promise to his new bride that their family would always have a way forward no matter the storms. My father had added his own sweat, reinforcing it after a flood in '72, and I'd poured my own into it, securing its historic status 5 years ago. This wasn't just property, it was blood, memory, a piece of who we were. The GHA had no right to touch it. "Daniel, what's the play?" Caleb asked, leaning against the truck, his voice steady but urgent. "You gonna call the sheriff, or just drive down to their office and raise hell?" I stood, brushing dirt from my hands. "Neither, not yet. First, we document everything, every splinter, every footprint. Then I call in some favors. This isn't just about a bridge, Caleb. It's about power. They think they can steamroll me because I'm out here alone. They're about to learn how wrong they are." He nodded, a spark of mischief in his eyes. "You're gonna make 'em sweat, aren't you?" "Like a Texas summer," I said, my voice steady now, the plan taking shape. "But we need to be smart. They're not done. This was just the first move." As we spoke, a low rumble echoed down the road. A white sedan crept into view, slowing as it passed the wreckage. The tinted windows hid the driver, but I caught a glimpse of a GHA logo on the door. Caleb tensed, his hand drifting toward the toolbox where he kept a wrench. "Easy," I said, my eyes locked on the car. "They're watching. Let 'em." The sedan idled for a moment, then sped off, leaving a cloud of dust. My pulse quickened, not with fear, but with clarity. This was no accident. The GHA wasn't just testing me, they were staking a claim, and that car was proof they weren't done yet. I turned to Caleb, my voice low but firm. "Get the trailer ready. We're salvaging what's left of this bridge tonight. And tomorrow, we start building the case." "For the bridge?" he asked, already moving toward the truck. "For everything," I said, my gaze fixed on the fading taillights. "They wanted a fight. They're gonna get one." The creek whispered on, oblivious to the war brewing on its banks. I didn't know then how far the GHA would go. Arson, trespassing, forged documents. But I knew one thing. They'd underestimated me. And that was their first mistake. The stars were sharp above Willow Creek, their light glinting off the water as I sat on the porch, a legal pad balanced on my knee, scribbling notes by the glow of a lantern. The destruction of the bridge had lit a fuse in me, but I wasn't about to charge into the Greenhaven Homeowners Association's office with fists swinging. That's what they expected, a hot-headed rancher they could dismiss. Instead, I was building a fortress of evidence, brick by brick, to bring them down on my terms. The GHA's orange sign still haunted my thoughts, its smug words a taunt I couldn't shake. They'd broken federal law, and I was going to make sure they paid for it. But first, I needed to understand their game. The white sedan we'd seen earlier with its GHA logo wasn't just a coincidence. They were circling, testing my resolve, and I knew they'd strike again. Caleb joined me, his boots thudding on the wooden steps as he carried 2 steaming mugs of coffee. "You're up late," he said, handing me one. "Planning to sue the whole county or just the HOA?" I took the mug, the warmth grounding me. Just the ones who think they can rewrite history with a wrecking crew. But I need more than photos of broken planks. They're not amateurs, Caleb. That sedan last night, it's part of something bigger. He leaned against the railing, squinting into the dark. "You think they're after the whole ranch, not just the bridge?" "I'd bet my last steer on it," I said. "They've been poking around for months. Those surveyors we saw, the ones with clipboards, they weren't measuring for a new road. They were mapping my land, trying to find a weak spot." Caleb's jaw tightened. "That's low, even for them. What's the next step?" "Tomorrow, we check the property line," I said. "Every inch. If they're planning to claim this land, they'll need to fake a boundary dispute. We're not giving them an inch to work with." The next morning, we were up before dawn, armed with a surveyor's map, a GPS, and a thermos of coffee strong enough to wake the dead. The air was crisp, the grass still damp with dew as we walked the perimeter of the ranch, marking boundary stakes with fluorescent tape. The creek gurgled nearby, a reminder of the gap where the bridge once stood. Without it, half my land, where the best grazing pastures lay, was cut off. I'd been hauling feed across a makeshift path, but it wasn't sustainable. The GHA knew that. They were counting on it. As we reached the northern edge, Caleb stopped short, pointing at a metal stake half buried in the dirt. "That's new," he said, kneeling to inspect it. "Wasn't here last month." I crouched beside him, running my fingers over the stake's smooth surface. It was stamped with a small GHA logo, barely visible. "They're marking my land," I said, my voice low, trying to redraw the lines before I notice. Caleb's eyes narrowed. "That's bold. You think they planted more?" "Let's find out," I said, standing. We spent the next hour combing the boundary, finding 3 more stakes, each one a silent claim on my property. I photographed them, noting their coordinates, my mind racing. This wasn't just about the bridge anymore. They were laying the groundwork for a legal siege, probably planning to file a zoning claim or a lien to force me out. But they didn't know I'd already started my counterattack. Back at the house, I dialed a contact at the U.S. Department of the Interior, a sharp lawyer named Sarah Whitaker, who'd helped me register the bridge years ago. "Sarah, it's me," I said when she picked up. "The GHA tore down my bridge, federally protected, no notice, no permits. I need you to pull the registry records." Her voice crackled with disbelief. "They did what? That's a federal offense. I'll have the files to you by noon, but you need to file a formal complaint with the Preservation Office. This is big." "I know," I said, "and I'm just getting started." As I hung up, Caleb was already hauling the last of the broken bridge planks into the barn, his face set in determination. "We keepin' these for evidence or firewood?" he asked, wiping sweat from his brow. "Evidence," I said. "Every splinter's a nail in their coffin." That afternoon, a new problem emerged. I was checking the mailbox when I found an envelope with no return address, just my name scrawled in sharp black ink. Inside was a single sheet, typed and unsigned. "Cease interference with Greenhaven Community Development or face consequences." No signature, no logo, just a threat as blunt as a sledgehammer. I showed it to Caleb, who read it twice, his knuckles whitening around the paper. "They're not even pretending to play nice," he said, tossing it onto the table. "You think this is Kessler's doing?" "William Kessler," I said, picturing the HOA vice president's smug face. "Maybe, but this feels bigger. Someone's pulling his strings." Caleb crossed his arms. "What's the move then? You gonna take this to the sheriff?" "Not yet," I said, folding the letter carefully. "This stays between us. If they're desperate enough to send threats, they're scared. let's keep them guessing. But the GA wasn't done. That evening, as I reviewed case files in my study, my phone buzzed with a motion alert from the trail cams we'd set up near the creek. I opened the app and my stomach twisted. A grainy feed showed two figures in dark hoodies moving along the riverbank, their flashlights darting like fireflies. One carried a crowbar, the other a camera. They weren't just trespassing, they were documenting, probably to fake a claim that my land was abandoned or public. "Caleb," I called, grabbing my jacket, "we've got company." He met me at the door, already holding a flashlight and a walkie-talkie. "How many?" he asked, his voice steady but tense. "Two," I said, "and they're armed with more than bad intentions." We slipped out the back, moving silently through the mesquite trees, the night air sharp against our skin. The creek's murmur masked our steps as we closed in. The intruders were near the old bridge site, one prying at a boundary marker while the other snapped photos. I flicked on my flashlight, pinning them in its beam. "Evening, gentlemen," I said, my voice cutting through the dark. "Mind explaining why you're tearing up my land?" They froze, the crowbar clattering to the ground. The one with the camera stammered, We're just checking the area. Got lost." "Lost with a crowbar and a camera?" Caleb said, stepping forward, his shadow looming. "On private property. Try again." The second man raised his hands. "Look, we were hired, that's all. Greenhaven said this was their land." "Greenhaven's wrong," I said, pulling out my phone to record. "And you're trespassing on federally protected property. Smile for the camera." They bolted, crashing through the brush toward the road. Caleb started after them, but I grabbed his arm. "Let them go. We've got what we need." Back at the house, I uploaded the footage to a secure drive and emailed it to Sarah, along with the threatening letter. "This is escalating. I need those records fast." Caleb paced the kitchen, his coffee untouched. "They're not gonna stop, are they?" "Not until we make them," I said, my eyes on the screen. "But they just gave us the rope to hang them with." The night felt heavier now, the stars no longer a comfort, but a reminder of the eyes watching us. The GA wasn't just after my land, they were playing a dangerous game, and I was ready to call their bluff. The dawn broke cold and gray, the air heavy with the scent of damp earth as I stood at the edge of Willow Creek, staring at the empty space where the bridge once connected my land. The trespassers from the night before had left their mark: gouged dirt, a toppled boundary stake, and the bitter taste of violation. The Greenhaven Homeowners Association's audacity was no longer a surprise, but their escalation was a warning. They weren't just testing boundaries, they were preparing to claim my ranch, and I needed to move faster than they could. The footage from the trail cams, the threatening letter, and the photos of their illicit boundary markers were already with Sarah Whitaker at the Department of the Interior. But evidence alone wouldn't stop them. I needed to outmaneuver them, to turn their arrogance into a trap. Caleb pulled up in his Jeep, the engine rumbling as he hopped out, a coil of rope slung over his shoulder. "Got the new cameras," he said, tossing a bag of equipment onto the ground. "You sure these'll catch anything those punks try next?" "They'd better," I replied, kneeling to inspect a motion sensor we'd rigged near the creek. "These guys aren't amateurs. They're building a case to steal this land, and we're not giving them a single frame to work with." He nodded, scanning the horizon. "You think they'll come back tonight?" "Count on it," I said. "They're desperate. That letter wasn't a bluff. It was a deadline. They want me rattled, but I'm not the one who's gonna break." We spent the morning fortifying the property. Caleb wired the new cameras to a solar-powered hub, their lenses trained on the creek and the northern boundary where the GHA stakes had appeared. I hammered signs into the ground: private property, federally protected land, each one a silent dare. The creek's steady flow was the only sound as we worked, but the quiet felt deceptive, like the calm before a rattlesnake's strike. By noon, Sarah called back, her voice clipped and urgent. "I've got the registry files," she said. "Your bridge is ironclad, protected under the National Historic Preservation Act since '99. No one touches it without federal approval. The GHA didn't file a single permit. They're wide open for prosecution. Good, I said, gripping the phone. What's the next step? File a formal complaint with the preservation office, she replied. I'm sending you the forms, but you need to move fast. If they're redrawing boundaries, they might try to bury this under local zoning laws. You got anything else to tie them to this? Plenty, I said. Trespassing footage, a threat letter, and stakes they planted on my land with their logo. I'm building a noose, Sarah. She chuckled, but it was grim. Careful, you're playing with vipers. Keep me posted. Hanging up, I turned to Caleb, who was testing a camera's night vision. We're on the clock, I said. They're not just after the bridge. They're trying to rewrite the map. We need to lock this place down. He wiped his hands on his jeans, his face hard. What's their end game? They can't just take your land without a fight. They think they can, I said. They're banking on me folding under pressure. Fines, threats, whatever they've got planned next. But I've got something they don't. The law. That afternoon, I drove to the county records office, a squat brick building that smelled of old paper and coffee. I requested every zoning map and property deed tied to my ranch, cross-referencing them against the GHA's recent filings. Sure enough, a new document had been submitted, a survey claiming my northern pasture was part of their expanded community zone. The signatures looked legitimate, but the dates were off, backdated by 3 months. Forgery, plain and simple. I photocopied everything, my pulse steady but my mind racing. They were building a paper trail to legitimize their theft, but they'd left fingerprints all over it. Back at the ranch, I spread the documents across the kitchen table, Caleb peering over my shoulder. This is dirty, he said, pointing at the falsified survey. They're trying to rewrite your deed. And failing, I replied, circling a discrepancy in red ink. This survey cites a non-existent county ordinance. They're sloppy, and that's our edge. He leaned back, crossing his arms. So, what's the plan? You gonna drag this to court? Not yet, I said. First, we make them think they're winning. Let them overplay their hand. Then, we hit them where it hurts. That night, the air turned sharp, a cold front rolling in as I sat in my study, uploading the forged survey to a secure server for Sarah. The house was quiet, save for the creak of the floorboards and the distant lowing of cattle. Then my phone pinged, a new alert from the cameras. I opened the feed and saw movement near the creek, a single figure, hooded, carrying what looked like a metal detector. Not a crowbar this time, but something more insidious. They were scanning the ground, likely looking for old utility lines or easements to exploit in their zoning claim. Caleb, we've got another guest, I called, grabbing my flashlight and a handheld radio. He was at the door in seconds, his face set. Same guys as last night? Maybe, I said, but this one's different. They're hunting for something. We moved through the darkness, sticking to the shadows of the cottonwood trees. The figure was methodical, sweeping the detector back and forth near the old bridge site. I signaled Caleb to circle around, cutting off their escape. As we closed in, the intruder froze, sensing us. I flicked on the flashlight, pinning them in the beam. Drop the detector, I said, my voice carrying over the creek's murmur, and explain why you're digging on my land. The figure, a young man, maybe mid-20s, with nervous eyes, raised his hands. I'm just doing my job, man. Greenhaven hired me to check for utilities. Utilities, Caleb scoffed, stepping into the light. On private land at midnight? You're a lousy liar. It's true, the man insisted, his voice cracking. They said this was their property, that I was clearing the way for a new development. This land's mine, I said, stepping closer, my phone recording. And you're trespassing on a federally protected site. Who at Greenhaven sent you? He hesitated, then muttered, some guy named Kessler, said it was urgent. Caleb shot me a look. William Kessler, figures. Get out, I said to the man, and tell Kessler he's digging his own grave. He didn't need to be twice, scrambling toward the road where a dark van waited. I caught the license plate as it sped off, my mind already cataloging the evidence. Kessler was moving faster than I'd expected, sending lackeys to fabricate claims under cover of night. But every move they made was another link in the chain I was forging. Back at the house, Caleb poured us both a shot of whiskey. "They're getting bold," he said, his voice low. "What's next? They gonna burn the barn down?" "Don't give them ideas," I said, downing the shot. "But we're ready. Tomorrow, I'm filing with the Preservation Office, and I'm calling in a favor from a friend at the U.S. Marshal's Office. This isn't just a land grab anymore. It's a conspiracy." The whiskey burned, but it didn't match the fire in my chest. The GHA thought they could outsmart me, but they were about to learn what happens when you challenge a man who knows the law and lives for justice. The horizon glowed faintly orange as I stood in the pre-dawn chill, my breath visible in the crisp air, staring at the smoldering ruins of the old barn. The acrid stench of burnt wood and chemicals stung my nostrils, and the twisted remains of a gas can gleamed in the early light, a jagged testament to the Greenhaven Homeowners Association's latest escalation. The barn, a weathered structure where I stored hay, tools, and memories of late-night repairs with my father, was gone, reduced to ash by a deliberate act of arson. The fire had erupted just after midnight, a deafening boom that shook the house and sent Caleb and me racing across the ranch. We'd fought the flames with a hose and extinguishers, but it was futile. The blaze was too fierce, too calculated. This wasn't vandalism, it was a message, written in fire. Caleb kicked a charred beam, his face tight with anger. "They've gone too far," he said, his voice rough. "This wasn't some kid with a match. They wanted to hit you hard." I nodded, my eyes scanning the wreckage. "They're trying to break me," I said, crouching to photograph the gas can's fragments. "They think if they burn enough, I'll sell or run, but they're wrong." He crossed his arms, the dawn light catching the sweat on his brow. "What's the play now? You got enough to bury them yet?" "Almost," I said, standing. "This fire's their mistake. It's not just property damage, it's a federal crime on protected land. They just handed me the match to burn them." The trail cam footage from the night before was already on my laptop, time-stamped and clear. At 11:47 p.m., a lone figure in the dark jacket had crept toward the barn, a canister in hand. Seconds later, a flash lit the screen, followed by the explosion that woke us. I'd sent the video to Sarah Whitaker and my contact at the U.S. Marshal's Office, a no-nonsense man named Tom Riley. But I wasn't stopping there. The GHA's forged surveys, trespassers, and now this were pieces of a larger puzzle, a coordinated effort to seize my land for their development dreams. I needed to strike back, and fast. By mid-morning, the sheriff's department arrived, led by a deputy named Clara Evans, her notepad already out. She surveyed the wreckage, her expression shifting from professional calm to grim realization as I walked her through the evidence. "This is no accident," she said, kneeling by the gas can. "You're saying the HOA's behind this." "I'm saying they sent someone to burn my barn," I replied, handing her a USB drive with the footage. "Sane people who've been planting stakes and sneaking around at night. They're building a case to steal my land, and this is their latest move." Clara's eyes narrowed. "That's a hell of an accusation. You got names?" "William Kessler," I said, GA's vice president. "He's the face, but I'm betting there's a bigger player pulling the strings." She jotted it down, then looked up. "You're a judge, right? Federal?" I nodded. "And this lands on the National Historic Register. That makes this arson a federal matter." Her radio crackled, but she ignored it, her gaze steady. "I'll get this to the fire marshal and the feds, but watch your back. If they're bold enough to do this, they're not done." As she drove off, Caleb joined me, his hands stuffed in his pockets. "You trust her to handle this?" "She's a start," I said, "but I'm not waiting for the sheriff to sort it out. We're going on offense." That afternoon, I drove to the GA's office, a sleek glass building that looked like it belonged in a city, not our dusty corner of Texas. The receptionist, a young man with a nervous smile, glanced up as I walked in. "Can I help you, sir?" he asked, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. "I need to see Kessler," I said, my voice calm but unyielding. "Now." He blinked, then tapped his screen. "Mr. Kessler's in a meeting. Can I take a message?" "Tell him the man whose barn he burned wants a word," I said, leaning on the counter. "And if he's smart, he won't keep me waiting." The receptionist's face paled, but before he could respond, a door swung open, and William Kessler himself appeared, his tailored suit and polished shoes a stark contrast to the chaos he'd unleashed. His smile was all teeth, no warmth. "Well, well," he said, crossing his arms. "Didn't expect you to come knocking so soon. Something wrong?" "You know damn well what's wrong," I said, stepping closer. "You sent someone to torch my barn last night. You're playing a dangerous game, Kessler, and you're losing." His smile didn't waver, but his eyes flickered. "That's a serious claim. Got proof, or are you just throwing punches in the dark?" "I've got video," I said, holding his gaze. "A man with a gas can, right before the explosion. And I'm guessing his paycheck traces back to you." Kessler laughed, a hollow sound. "You're paranoid. Maybe it was an accident. Old barns catch fire all the time." "Not with gasoline and a match," I shot back. "You're on federally protected land now. That's not a fine or a slap on the wrist. It's prison." He leaned in, his voice dropping. "You're out of your depth, Judge. This isn't your courtroom. Push too hard, and you'll lose more than a barn." I didn't flinch. "Threaten me again, and you'll be answering to a grand jury. Walk away, Kessler, while you still can." He held my stare for a moment, then turned and disappeared into his office. The receptionist avoided my eyes as I left, the glass doors hissing shut behind me. I knew Kessler wouldn't back down. He was too deep in whatever scheme the GHA was running. But I'd rattled him, and that was enough for now. Back at the ranch, Caleb was waiting, a rifle propped against the porch. "How'd it go?" he asked, his tone wary. "He's scared," I said, climbing the steps. "But not enough to stop. We need to be ready for their next move." That night, the air felt electric, like a storm was brewing beyond the horizon. I was in my study, compiling a report for the Federal Preservation Office, when my phone buzzed with another camera alert. The feed showed 3 figures near the northern pasture, not at the creek this time, but closer to the cattle pens. They were moving fast, cutting through the wire fence with bolt cutters. My heart sank. They weren't after evidence now, they were after my herd. "Caleb, grab the keys," I shouted, bolting for the door. "They're at the pens." We tore across the ranch in the pickup, the headlights slicing through the dark. The cattle were restless, lowing and stomping as we reached the pasture. The gate was wide open, the chain severed, and hoofprints led toward the woods. The intruders were gone, but they'd done their damage. Half my herd was loose, scattered into the night. "Damn it," Caleb growled, slamming the truck door. "They're trying to ruin you." "They're trying to make me sell," I said, scanning the trees. "If I can't run the ranch, they think I'll give up. They're wrong." We spent hours rounding up the cattle, guiding them back with flashlights and calls, the cold biting at our hands. By dawn, we'd recovered most, but 3 steers were missing, likely deep in the forest. As we repaired the gate, Caleb's voice was low. "This is war, isn't it?" "It's been war," I said, hammering a new chain into place. "They just made it personal." I filed a report with Clara, attaching the new footage and a detailed account of the sabotage. But as I sent it, a new email arrived from Sarah. Found a link. GHA's funding ties to a Miami real estate firm, Coastal Ventures. They specialize in flipping rural land for luxury developments. Your ranch is their next target. Be careful. I stared at the screen, the pieces clicking into place. Kessler wasn't just a greedy HOA suit. He was a pawn in a larger game, and they just raised the stakes. The morning sun cast long shadows across the ranch, glinting off the freshly repaired cattle gate as I stood with a cup of coffee, the weight of the past week pressing on my shoulders. The GHA's arson, the cut fences, and the revelation of their ties to Coastal Ventures had turned this fight into something far bigger than a local dispute. They weren't just after my land. They were pawns in a corporate machine aiming to swallow rural Texas for profit. But I wasn't folding. The evidence was stacked. Camera footage, forged surveys, a threatening letter, and now a paper trail linking the GHA to a Miami developer. The law was my weapon, and I was ready to wield it. Today, I'd file the federal complaint that would set the wheels of justice in motion. But the air felt charged, like the quiet before a lightning strike. The GHA wasn't done, and I knew their next move would be desperate. Caleb emerged from the barn, his face etched with exhaustion but resolve. "You see that drone last night?" he asked, wiping grease from his hands. "Flew right over the house, too high for the net launcher." I nodded, my jaw tight. They're watching us, probably Coastal Ventures, trying to map the ranch for their next play. We need to keep those cameras rolling. He glanced at the horizon where the creek shimmered. "You think they'll hit us again before you file?" "They'd be stupid not to," I said, setting my mug down. "They know we're closing in. Let's check the perimeter. No surprises today." We walked the property, inspecting every fence post and camera, the morning dew soaking our boots. Near the creek, I spotted something new, a small black device half buried in the mud, its red light blinking faintly. I knelt, my pulse quickening. It was a GPS tracker, sleek and professional, not the work of an HOA lackey, but a corporate operative. "Caleb, look at this," I called, holding it up. "They're tagging us like cattle." His eyes narrowed. "That's military grade. You think Kessler's got friends with deep pockets?" "Not Kessler," I said, pocketing the device. "Coastal Ventures. They're not playing small anymore." Back at the house, I called Sarah Whitaker, my contact at the Department of the Interior. "Found a tracker by the creek," I said, my voice steady. "High-end, probably tied to the Miami firm you flagged. Can you get the FBI to trace it?" Sarah's tone was sharp. "That's espionage-level tech. I'll loop in a contact at the Bureau, but you need to file that complaint today. The Preservation Office is ready to escalate this to a federal investigation." "Already drafting it," I said, "but I need something else. Can you pull any permits Coastal Ventures has filed in Texas? If they're planning a development, they've left a trail." "On it," she said, "and watch your back. These guys don't play clean." As I hung up, Caleb was at the kitchen table cleaning his rifle. "You really think the feds will move fast enough?" he asked, his voice low. "These bastards are already 3 steps ahead." "They're not ahead," I said, opening my laptop. "They're sloppy. That tracker's proof. They're panicking." But the GHA wasn't waiting. That afternoon, a black SUV rolled up to the ranch gate. No plates, no markings. A man in a crisp suit stepped out, holding a manila envelope. Caleb grabbed the rifle, but I held up a hand. "Let's hear him out." The man approached, his face unreadable. "You're the owner?" he asked, his voice smooth, corporate. "I'm the man you're trying to run off," I replied, crossing my arms. "What's in the envelope?" He handed it over. "A proposal from Coastal Ventures. They're prepared to buy your property for a generous sum. Avoid the legal mess." I opened it, glancing at the number. 7 figures, enough to start over anywhere. I laughed, sharp and cold. "You think I'd sell my family's legacy for a paycheck? After you burned my barn and cut my fences?" His eyes flickered, but he kept his cool. "It's a fair offer. Things could get complicated otherwise." "Complicated?" Caleb stepped forward, his voice like gravel. "You mean like blowing up our property or spying with drones?" The man didn't flinch. "I'm just the messenger, but I'd advise you to consider it. Coastal Ventures doesn't lose. Then they're about to learn how, I said, tearing the envelope in half and tossing it into the dirt. Get off my land. He stared at me, then turned and drove away, the SUV's dust cloud lingering like a threat. Caleb spat on the ground. That was ballsy. You sure you want to poke that bear? They poked first, I said, and they're about to choke on it. That evening, I finalized the federal complaint, attaching every piece of evidence, footage, photos, the tracker, and Sarah's report on Coastal Ventures' shady permits. I sent it to the preservation office and copied Tom Riley at the marshal's office. But as I hit send, a new alert flashed on my phone, a camera near the southern fence. The feed showed a group of men, not sneaking this time, but brazenly unloading equipment, survey gear, floodlights, and what looked like a portable drilling rig. Caleb, they're back, I said, grabbing my keys, and they brought hardware. We sped to the story Low Cool, Jock Katwich in Storytelling Photon American. We sped to the site in the pickup, the night air thick with tension. The men, 5 of them wearing GHA vests, were setting up lights, their rig grinding into the soil near my property line. I slammed on the brakes and stepped out, my voice booming. What the hell are you doing on my land? One man, clearly the leader, turned, unfazed. We're conducting a survey. Greenhaven's expanding its jurisdiction. This is authorized. Authorized by who? I snapped, pulling out my phone to record. This is private property and you're drilling without a permit. He smirked, stepping closer. We've got new maps. Your land's part of our zone now. Check with the county. Caleb gripped his flashlight like a club. You're full of it. Get your gear and get out, or we'll make you. The man laughed, but his crew hesitated, eyeing us. I held up the phone. Everything you're doing is on camera. You're violating federal law. Walk away, or you're all in cuffs by morning. Before he could respond, headlights flashed. 2 black SUVs roared up, federal marshals spilling out. Tom Riley led the charge, badge gleaming. Step away from the equipment, he barked. You're under arrest for trespassing and tampering with protected land. The leader's smirk vanished as the marshals cuffed him and his crew. Caleb let out a low whistle. That was fast. Called Tom on the way, I said, my heart still pounding. They're done. The next morning, the news broke. Federal judge targets HOA in land grab scandal. The story spread, sparking outrage and support from homeowners nationwide, their own tales of HOA abuse flooding my inbox. But the real victory came at dusk when I walked to the creek with Caleb, the community gathering behind us. We'd started rebuilding the bridge, plank by plank, with volunteers, ranchers, carpenters, even kids from the local school. A bronze plaque gleamed on the new handrail, etched with my grandfather's words, "For my sons and grandsons, may this bridge hold us together, no matter the storm." Caleb clapped my shoulder, his voice soft. You did it. They couldn't break you. Not me, I said, looking at the crowd. Us. This is bigger than one man's fight. The creek whispered below, and for the first time in weeks, I felt peace. The GHA was crumbling, Coastal Ventures exposed, and the bridge, our bridge, stood strong, a testament to justice and legacy. The saga of the Willow Creek Bridge teaches us that justice and legacy are worth fighting for, no matter the odds. It shows how unchecked power, whether from a corrupt HOA or a corporate giant, can threaten our roots, but resilience and truth can prevail. One man, armed with evidence and determination, exposed a scheme to steal his land, proving that standing firm protects not just property, but pride and history. The community's support in rebuilding the bridge underscores the strength of unity against greed. This isn't just a story, it's a call to defend what matters, to hold the powerful accountable, and to honor the sacrifices of those before us. When faced with injustice, gather your proof, rally your allies, and fight smart. The law, wielded wisely, can topple even the most arrogant foes. This tale reminds us that no one is above accountability, and every legacy deserves a defender. Want more stories of courage and justice? Like, share, and subscribe to our channel to catch the next battle against those who think they can bully their way to victory. Join us, and let's keep the fight alive.